Have you ever felt completely ignored by the people around you? Maybe it's at work, at school, or even with friends and family. No matter how hard you try, it feels like no one is listening. Does this sound familiar? Or perhaps you're wondering, why do some people seem to get all the attention while you're left out in the shadows? Imagine this. You're at a social event, surrounded by people, but no one seems to acknowledge your presence. You speak, but it's as if your words vanish into thin air. The feeling of being invisible can be overwhelming. You start questioning yourself, wondering if you're not good enough, or if you're just not interesting enough to be noticed. But here's the thing. What if being ignored is not a sign of your failure, but an opportunity for something much greater? Welcome to Wisdom Woven, where today, we dive into the fascinating world of why being ignored may actually be the key to unlocking a deeper understanding of yourself and the world around you. Stick with us as we explore how this experience, though painful, can lead to profound personal growth, according to the teachings of Buddhism. There are so many views on this channel, but only 0.2% of viewers subscribe. So, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Every opinion matters to us. Now, let's dive into how you can turn the experience of being ignored into one of the most transformative moments of your life. In this video, we'll uncover the wisdom hidden in Buddhism that can help you understand why being ignored is not just an obstacle, but a lesson in disguise. Are you ready to shift your perspective and learn how to embrace this feeling? Let's get started. The root of being ignored. Insights from Buddhism. When you feel ignored, it's easy to feel frustrated, hurt, or even confused. But what if I told you that being ignored has a deeper, more meaningful lesson hidden within it? In Buddhism, this feeling is often linked to our attachment to the idea of being noticed, loved, or valued by others. At the heart of these emotions lies a simple yet powerful Buddhist principle, attachment. In Buddhism, attachment is not about loving or caring for others. It's about how strongly we cling to things, ideas, and expectations. When we attach ourselves to the need for approval or recognition, we make ourselves vulnerable to the pain of being ignored. Why? Because we are depending on something outside of us, other people's opinions, to feel worthy or validated. Let's take a step back and think about the nature of attachment. Imagine you are holding onto a rope. If you grip it tightly, your hand starts to hurt, your fingers cramp, and eventually, your whole arm aches. Now, imagine if you simply let go of the rope. Suddenly, your hand is free, and the pain disappears. This is what happens when we release our attachment to others' opinions. The pain of being ignored fades, and we find peace in simply being ourselves. Now, think about the idea of impermanence, another central concept in Buddhism. Everything and everyone is constantly changing. People's attention shifts from one thing to another, and your position in their focus is never guaranteed. Recognizing the impermanent nature of these interactions can help you find peace in moments when you feel overlooked. It's not a reflection of your worth. It's just a part of life. In fact, the idea that being ignored is somehow a sign of personal failure comes from our attachment to the idea of permanence. We mistakenly believe that we should always be noticed, appreciated, or praised. But, just like the seasons change, people's attention comes and goes. It's not about you. It's about the nature of life itself. The more we resist this reality, the more we suffer. This brings us to the self, another concept in Buddhism. We often identify ourselves with how others see us. If people ignore us, we start thinking that there's something wrong with us. But in Buddhism, we're taught that the self is not a fixed thing. It's fluid, ever-changing, and not defined by external circumstances. You are not who others think you are, and your value doesn't depend on their attention. The moment we stop relying on the opinions of others to define our worth, we start to see things differently. We begin to understand that being ignored is not a punishment. It's an opportunity for self-reflection and growth. It's a chance to reconnect with the truth of who we are, beyond the labels others place on us. At its core, Buddhism teaches us that true peace comes from within, not from external validation. When we stop looking for approval, we open ourselves to the freedom of simply existing without the need for constant recognition. The more we let go of this attachment, the less we are affected by being ignored. You might wonder, how can I truly let go of this attachment? It's not easy, but the Buddhist practice of mindfulness can help. By becoming more aware of your thoughts, emotions, and reactions, you start to notice how much of your suffering comes from your attachment to others' opinions. The more you practice mindfulness, the more you begin to detach from these external sources of validation. Take a moment right now to reflect on your own life. How much do you rely on the approval of others? How much does their attention, or lack of it, affect your mood and sense of self-worth? Recognizing this pattern is the first step in breaking free from it. The next step is learning to accept the ebb and flow of attention, knowing that your worth is not defined by who notices you or who doesn't. When you can let go of this attachment, you create space for something even more valuable, inner peace. And it's through this peace that you find your true strength. Being ignored may still sting at times, but you will no longer feel dependent on others' opinions to feel good about yourself. Instead, you will be grounded in the understanding that your worth is inherent, and nothing can take that away from you. The Buddhist approach to being ignored is about returning to yourself. It's about stepping away from the need for external validation and finding fulfillment from within. When you begin to practice this detachment, you will notice something incredible. The more you let go, the more at ease you become with yourself. And when you are at ease with yourself, you stop feeling the need to be noticed. You become content, no matter what the world around you is doing. So, let's recap. Being ignored is not a reflection of your value as a person. It is simply an invitation to examine your attachments, your expectations, and your need for external approval. In Buddhism, this is not seen as a negative experience, but as an opportunity to practice detachment, impermanence, and mindfulness. By releasing the grip of attachment, you free yourself from the pain of feeling ignored and, instead, embrace the freedom of self-acceptance. The next time you feel overlooked or ignored, remember this. It is not about you. It is about the transient nature of human attention and the impermanent circumstances of life. Through the lens of Buddhism, being ignored is not a burden, but a gift that allows you to grow stronger, more self-aware, and more at peace with who you truly are. In the next section, we will delve deeper into how the teachings of Buddhism can help you transform these painful moments into opportunities for growth and wisdom. But for now, take a deep breath, let go of your attachments, and remember that the true source of happiness comes from within you. Understanding the ego and its role in social dynamics. Imagine a mirror held up to your face. What do you see? The reflection staring back at you is not just a physical image. It's a story, a complex set of ideas, beliefs, and expectations. This is what we call the ego. The ego is like a character in a movie, constantly trying to keep the plot moving in its favor. It wants attention, validation, and recognition. It craves approval, and it believes that it's important for others to notice it. But here's the tricky part. When you rely too much on the ego, it becomes like a chain, weighing you down and making you feel lost when you're ignored or rejected. In Buddhism, the ego is understood as an illusion, a temporary, fluctuating aspect of who we are, created by our thoughts, feelings, and experiences. It's not our true self. The real you is something much deeper, much more enduring, and more peaceful. However, most of us, without realizing it, get caught up in the stories the ego tells us. It makes us believe that if we're not recognized, we're not worthy. If others ignore us, it means we are invisible, insignificant, or unimportant. But is this really true? Let's take a moment to think about how the ego works in our daily lives. You may have felt ignored by your friends or colleagues. Maybe they didn't reply to your message or didn't pay attention to what you were saying. In these moments, the ego can easily get triggered, making you feel hurt or upset. It might tell you, "They don't care about me. I must not be good enough." But what if the ego is wrong? What if being ignored isn't a reflection of your worth, but a reflection of the ego's demands? When you understand this, you begin to see that the pain you feel is not because of others' actions, but because of your attachment to the idea of what you think you deserve. The ego is attached to the belief that it must always be noticed, praised, and acknowledged. But when you step back from these desires, you free yourself from the chains of the ego. Buddhist teachings tell us that the more we feed the ego, the stronger it becomes, and the more we suffer. This is known as samsara, the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, but on a mental level. The more we react to external circumstances with ego-driven responses, the more we create our own suffering. The key is not to suppress the ego, but to understand its nature and to stop identifying with it. Consider this. Have you ever been around someone who doesn't seem to care about what others think? They may not seek approval, and they don't get upset when they're ignored. Instead, they remain calm, peaceful, and content, no matter what's happening around them. What you're witnessing is someone who has learned to detach from their ego. They are aware of it, but they don't let it control their emotions or actions. Now, let's explore how this concept applies to the feeling of being ignored. When someone ignores you, your ego may feel hurt. It might shout, "Why don't they care about me?" But if you pause and reflect, you might realize that the person is simply going through their own struggles. Their actions have nothing to do with your value, but the ego convinces you otherwise. The challenge is to stop reacting based on the ego's need for validation and instead see the situation for what it truly is, an opportunity for growth. In Buddhist practice, we are encouraged to be mindful of our reactions. This mindfulness helps us recognize when the ego is at work and gives us the power to choose how we respond. Instead of letting the ego tell us that we're being ignored because we're not worthy, mindfulness allows us to see the bigger picture. We can understand that we are worthy of love and respect, regardless of whether or not we receive it in any given moment. Let's go back to the mirror. If you stand in front of it and only focus on the reflection, you might miss the bigger reality. There's a whole world outside the mirror, a world that exists whether or not the reflection is perfect. The ego is like the reflection. It's not the full truth of who we are. The moment we stop identifying with it, we begin to see beyond it. So, what can we do when we feel ignored? Instead of allowing the ego to take over and create unnecessary suffering, we can practice letting go. This is where Buddhism offers us a powerful tool: detachment. Detachment doesn't mean withdrawing from life or from relationships. It simply means not allowing external circumstances, like being ignored, to determine your sense of self-worth. Detachment is about being free from the pull of ego-driven desires and reactions. Think of it like this. You are standing in a room and someone walks by without acknowledging you. Your first instinct might be to feel rejected or invisible. But instead of letting that reaction control you, pause and breathe. Notice the feeling of discomfort in your body and mind. Observe it without judgment. Then, let it go. You don't need to hold on to the belief that being ignored means something negative about you. You don't need to attach any meaning to the situation at all. This practice of detachment is liberating. It allows you to be free from the need for approval and validation, and instead, find peace within yourself. You begin to realize that your worth is not tied to others' perceptions of you. It's not something you have to earn. It simply is. By understanding the ego and its role in social dynamics, you can start to see being ignored in a new light. It's no longer a reflection of your inadequacy, but a mirror showing you where your ego is still attached to validation from the outside world. And in this awareness, you find freedom. In the next section, we will explore how cultivating compassion can help you transform the feeling of being ignored into an opportunity to connect with others on a deeper level. But for now, remember that the ego is not the true you. It's a temporary, ever-changing part of the self. Once you stop identifying with it, you'll discover a peace that nothing, not even being ignored, can take away from you. Silence and solitude, a path to inner strength. In life, we are constantly surrounded by noise. The sounds of the world, the chatter of people, the constant buzz of notifications, the hum of cars, and even the pressure of expectations. It's easy to forget what it's like to be truly quiet, to simply be without the distraction of everything around us. But in Buddhism, silence and solitude are not just things we experience in the absence of others. They are tools for personal growth and self-awareness. When we talk about silence, it's not just the absence of sound. It's about creating space where you can hear your own thoughts without the interference of the world. The truth is, we live in a world where we're rarely ever alone with our own minds. We're constantly distracted by what others think of us or what we need to do next. But to really understand yourself, you need to create a space where you can hear your own voice clearly. This is where the practice of silence begins. Think of it like this. When a pot of water is boiling, the surface is chaotic, with bubbles everywhere. But if you take the pot off the heat and let it sit, the bubbles slowly subside, and the water becomes calm and still. The same happens when you take time for silence. Your mind, just like the water, becomes clearer when you stop the constant stimulation. The more you sit in this stillness, the more you begin to understand what lies beneath the noise of everyday life. In Buddhism, this practice of silence is not about escaping the world. It's about turning inward, so you can better understand both your own mind and the world around you. We often seek answers outside of ourselves, thinking that the approval or opinions of others will give us clarity. But in reality, it is in the quiet moments of solitude that we find our most profound answers. Solitude, in the Buddhist sense, isn't about loneliness. It's about being in the company of yourself. It's in these moments that you truly get to know who you are, without the influences of others. You begin to notice your thoughts, emotions, and reactions without judgment. This awareness helps you gain insight into the nature of your mind and how it reacts to different situations. When you're alone, you're free from the distractions of the world, and this gives you the space to explore what is important to you, without external pressure. One of the most powerful lessons Buddhism teaches us is the importance of finding peace within ourselves. This peace isn't something that can be bought, found in material things, or even achieved through the approval of others. It is something that comes from within, and silence and solitude are key to unlocking this peace. When you spend time alone, you begin to realize that you don't need external validation to feel complete. In fact, you begin to see that you are whole just as you are. Many people fear being alone because it forces them to confront their own thoughts and insecurities. But this is exactly why solitude is so powerful. It gives you the opportunity to face what lies deep within you, to acknowledge your fears, doubts, and desires, without the distractions of the outside world. Only by confronting these feelings can you begin to understand and transform them. And that is where true growth lies. Not in avoiding the uncomfortable, but in sitting with it, learning from it, and using it to move forward. Another essential aspect of silence and solitude is the practice of mindfulness. Mindfulness, at its core, is about being fully present in the moment. It's about experiencing life as it happens, without rushing or judging. In the midst of our busy lives, we often forget to pause and notice what's right in front of us. We're either thinking about the past or worrying about the future. But when we practice mindfulness, we bring our attention back to the present moment. This practice is deeply tied to silence, as it helps clear away the mental clutter that so often clouds our judgment. Let's take a moment to reflect on a simple practice. The next time you find yourself feeling overwhelmed, take a step back. Sit in a quiet place, close your eyes, and focus on your breathing. Notice how your body feels. Let go of all the thoughts racing through your mind. Focus only on the sensation of each breath, how it enters and leaves your body. In that moment, you are no longer distracted by the outside world. You are fully present, fully aware, and deeply connected to yourself. This simple practice of mindfulness can have profound effects on your mental and emotional well-being. Buddhism teaches that true strength comes from within, and silence and solitude are the paths to discovering this strength. In today's world, we often look for strength in external sources. We think strength means being loud, being noticed, or being constantly busy. But true strength is found in the quiet moments, when we are alone with our thoughts, and when we have the courage to face them. It's in these moments that we realize we don't need to be constantly on the move or seeking validation from others. We are enough as we are. But why is solitude so important for personal growth? It's because, in solitude, we have the space to understand ourselves without interference. When we are constantly surrounded by others, we often lose sight of who we truly are. We adopt the values, beliefs, and opinions of those around us, sometimes without even realizing it. Solitude, however, gives us the chance to strip away all of that and get back to our core. It allows us to reconnect with our true self, free from the expectations and judgments of others. At first, solitude might feel uncomfortable or even painful. The silence can feel heavy, and you may be tempted to distract yourself with noise or activity. But as you practice, you'll begin to notice that the discomfort starts to fade. The more you sit in solitude, the more you realize that you don't need anything outside of yourself to feel complete. You become more comfortable with your own company, and in that comfort, you begin to discover a strength that comes from within. In Buddhist teachings, there is an emphasis on the idea of letting go. When we are constantly surrounded by people, activities, and noise, we hold on to external things for comfort. But in solitude, we have the opportunity to let go of those attachments and return to a place of peace and contentment. This doesn't mean we reject the world around us. Rather, it means we stop relying on external things to define our happiness. We find that happiness comes from within, and silence and solitude are the perfect spaces to experience this truth. Silence and solitude allow us to reconnect with the present moment. It's easy to get lost in thoughts about the past or future, but in the stillness of being alone, we can come back to the here and now. In these quiet moments, we can observe our thoughts without judgment and understand them for what they are. This self-awareness is the key to inner peace, and it's something that can only be achieved through silence and solitude. Buddhism teaches that we are all interconnected, and part of that connection comes from understanding ourselves. The more we understand ourselves in solitude, the more we can understand others. When we are at peace with who we are, we can engage with others in a more meaningful and compassionate way. Silence and solitude aren't just about being alone. They are about discovering the deep connection we have with the world around us. Through this journey of silence and solitude, we come to realize that we don't need to chase after approval or recognition from others. We are whole and complete as we are. In the stillness, we uncover the truth that has always been within us. And from that truth, we can live our lives with greater clarity, purpose, and peace. So, take time to embrace silence. Spend time alone. Let go of the distractions. You may just find that in these quiet moments, you'll discover a strength and wisdom that you never knew existed within you. The power of compassion, turning isolation into connection. In life, we all experience moments of isolation. At times, it can feel like we are alone, rejected, or misunderstood. People may overlook us, ignore our presence, or fail to acknowledge our thoughts and feelings. It's easy to fall into the trap of believing that this isolation is something to be feared, something that must be avoided at all costs. But what if, instead of running from these feelings, we chose to face them with compassion? Compassion is not just about feeling pity for others. It is about recognizing that everyone, at some point, experiences suffering and loneliness. It's the ability to understand and empathize with others, not just when things are going well, but also when they are struggling, just like you might be when you feel ignored. In Buddhism, compassion is one of the highest virtues. It is the desire to alleviate the suffering of others. Compassion is seen as a way of connecting with the world, not through words or grand gestures, but through the deep understanding that every person is carrying their own struggles. When we feel isolated, we are not alone in our experience. Many others walk this path, too. The key is to see that we are all interconnected. When you are ignored or left out, it's easy to focus inward, to think only of your own hurt and frustration. But Buddhism teaches us that this self-centered view is where the pain starts to deepen. It is in these moments of feeling disconnected from others that we have the greatest opportunity to connect, not just with the people around us, but with our deeper sense of empathy and compassion. What would it be like if, instead of letting the pain of being ignored define us, we turned our focus outward? What if we used our experience of isolation to become more compassionate toward others who may be feeling the same way? This is where real growth begins. When we choose to reach out, when we choose to see the world through the eyes of others, we not only transform our own lives, but also the lives of those around us. Let me give you an example. Imagine you are at a gathering, and no one seems to acknowledge your presence. It might hurt at first, and you may feel like retreating into yourself. But what if, instead of withdrawing, you looked around and noticed someone else who seems just as ignored or out of place as you? What if you reached out, with no expectation of anything in return, and offered them your kindness, your attention, or simply your presence? In this moment, you are not only practicing compassion, but you are also breaking the cycle of isolation. The act of reaching out, without expecting anything in return, opens the door to true connection. It transforms your experience from one of loneliness into one of shared human understanding. You begin to see that the world isn't just about being seen or heard. It's about seeing and hearing others. In Buddhism, there is a concept called Bodhisattva, which means the mind of enlightenment. It is the intention to become enlightened, not just for your own sake, but for the benefit of all beings. Bodhisattva encourages us to see the suffering of others and respond with love, kindness, and understanding. It's the realization that by alleviating the suffering of others, we alleviate our own. When you are ignored, you are given an opportunity to practice Bodhisattva. Instead of retreating into your own discomfort, you can use that moment to foster compassion. It's an opportunity to step outside of yourself and connect with others at a deeper level. Imagine how different your experience would be if, when ignored, you thought to yourself, "I wonder who else feels invisible in this moment. How can I reach out to them?" This simple shift in perspective can transform your interactions and your understanding of what it means to connect with others. Compassion is not something we give only when we are comfortable or when it's convenient. True compassion arises when we are able to stretch beyond our own pain and recognize the pain in others. In Buddhist philosophy, we are taught that we are all interconnected, that our suffering is not isolated to ourselves alone. Just as your suffering is real, so too is the suffering of others. When you ignore someone, it's not just their pain. It is a shared human experience. And when you choose to acknowledge that pain, whether it's your own or someone else's, you are aligning yourself with the deepest truths of existence. You don't have to do anything grand to practice compassion. It can start with small acts, listening to someone when they speak, offering a smile to someone who seems down, or simply being present with someone without expecting anything in return. These simple actions are the seeds of connection. Through compassion, you begin to build bridges where there were once walls. So, how do we bring this into our daily lives, especially when we feel ignored? First, we need to stop seeing our own isolation as something to fix or escape from. Instead, see it as a moment to cultivate empathy. Ask yourself, who else might be feeling the way I do right now? How can I connect with them? When you take the focus off yourself and look for others who may be experiencing the same thing, you create a space where connection can flourish. This is how compassion has the power to turn isolation into connection. It takes us from feeling like victims of our circumstances to becoming active participants in the healing of ourselves and others. By embracing the feelings of being ignored and turning them into opportunities for compassion, we break free from the trap of loneliness. Instead of isolating ourselves further, we begin to open ourselves up to a world of connection, understanding, and deep human empathy. Remember, compassion is not about feeling sorry for others or pitying them. It is about recognizing our shared humanity. When we practice compassion, we move away from judgment and toward understanding. It's about seeing the good in others, even when the world seems to ignore them. When we choose to engage with compassion, we are stepping into a higher form of connection, one that transcends the surface level and touches the hearts of others. As you continue to experience moments of being ignored, let them serve as a reminder that your role in this world is not to be noticed by everyone, but to notice everyone. When you offer compassion, you make the world a little less lonely. You help turn moments of isolation into moments of shared understanding, and in doing so, you create a world that is kinder, more loving, and more connected. The power of compassion isn't just about making others feel better. It's about creating a ripple effect that transforms everything you touch. When you choose compassion, you choose connection. You choose to no longer let feelings of isolation control you. Instead, you become the catalyst for change. And through this simple yet profound practice, you can turn every moment of being ignored into an opportunity to connect with the deeper, more compassionate part of yourself and others. In the end, the greatest lesson here is that we are not alone in our struggles. The power of compassion allows us to see that our pain is shared, and through understanding and kindness, we can turn that pain into a force for good. Practicing detachment, letting go of the need for validation. In a world that constantly pushes us to seek approval, being ignored can feel like a heavy weight. We're taught to seek validation from others, from friends, colleagues, and even strangers. But what if I told you that true peace and freedom come not from others' opinions, but from letting go of this need for constant validation? Let's take a moment to think about the times you felt hurt when people ignored you. Maybe it was a conversation that you felt was brushed aside, or a social situation where you were left out. Your first instinct might have been to wonder, why doesn't anyone care about me? But this reaction is driven by something deep within us, something that Buddhism teaches us to observe and understand: the attachment to our ego and the desire for approval. The Buddha, in his teachings, spoke about the nature of attachment. Attachment to external validation, to the praise of others, or to any form of recognition can imprison us in cycles of craving and dissatisfaction. When we rely on the opinions of others for our sense of self-worth, we allow our happiness to be dictated by forces outside of our control. In Buddhism, this is referred to as dukkha, the suffering that comes from attachment and desire. Imagine you're walking in the forest. You're surrounded by the beauty of nature, the rustling of leaves, the song of birds. But suddenly, you start thinking, what if someone sees me walking? What if they judge me for being slow or too loud? The moment you become attached to how others perceive you, you stop enjoying the walk. You lose the present moment because your mind is caught up in external concerns. The same is true when we constantly seek validation. We stop enjoying the present. We stop appreciating ourselves. We focus so much on what others think of us that we forget to honor our own feelings, thoughts, and actions. This leads to a life full of insecurities and doubts, always looking outward for confirmation, never truly finding peace within. But what if we could change that? What if, instead of seeking approval, we could practice detachment from the need for validation? In Buddhism, detachment doesn't mean disconnecting from the world or becoming cold and indifferent. It means releasing the grip we have on the need for recognition and approval from others. It's about realizing that your worth is not defined by anyone else's opinion. Detachment is like letting go of a heavy backpack when you've been walking for hours. At first, it might feel strange or uncomfortable because you're used to carrying the weight. But as you let go, you realize how much lighter you feel. The burden of needing others to approve of you begins to fade, and you can move freely in your own life. When we practice detachment, we begin to trust ourselves more. We no longer need constant affirmation to feel validated. Our sense of self-worth becomes more grounded in who we truly are, not in how others perceive us. This doesn't mean we stop caring about others or their opinions. It means we stop allowing those opinions to define us. The Buddha taught that when we stop seeking validation, we are better able to practice true compassion, both for ourselves and others. Compassion is the opposite of seeking validation. It is understanding and caring for others without expecting anything in return. When we detach from the need for approval, we can love freely, without conditions or expectations. We can see others clearly, without the filter of how we want them to see us. Here's a simple exercise you can try today. The next time you feel ignored or overlooked, pause for a moment. Take a deep breath and observe how your mind reacts. Do you feel hurt? Do you start to question your worth? These thoughts are natural, but they are also temporary. In that moment, remind yourself that your value is not tied to anyone's opinion. You are worthy, not because of what others think, but because you exist, because you are human, and because you are connected to everything around you. This simple act of awareness is the first step in practicing detachment. By recognizing when we are caught in the cycle of seeking validation, we can slowly let go of those attachments. With time, we start to feel more at peace with ourselves, regardless of how others treat us. The journey toward detachment is not an overnight process. It requires patience and practice. It might feel difficult at first because we're so used to seeking external approval. But remember, just like any new habit, the more you practice detachment, the easier it becomes. You start to realize that you are enough just as you are, without needing anyone to tell you so. One powerful tool that can help you practice detachment is mindfulness. By being present in each moment, you can break free from the constant need for validation. When you are truly present, you are not thinking about how others perceive you. You are simply existing in the moment, aware of your thoughts, feelings, and actions without judgment. A key aspect of mindfulness is learning to let go of the stories we tell ourselves. We often create narratives in our minds about who we are based on how others treat us. If they ignore me, I must be unimportant. But these stories are just that, stories. They are not the truth. The truth is that your worth does not depend on how others see you. You are inherently valuable. As you continue on your journey of practicing detachment, you may start to notice shifts in your life. People may still ignore you from time to time, but you won't feel the same pain. You will realize that their behavior is not a reflection of your worth. You will find yourself less affected by external opinions, more grounded in who you truly are. And as you release the need for validation, something beautiful begins to happen. You start to attract the right people into your life. You draw in those who value you for who you truly are, not for the image you try to project. You begin to build deeper, more meaningful connections, rooted in mutual respect and understanding. The practice of detachment is not about closing yourself off from the world. It's about opening yourself up to the truth of who you are without needing anyone to validate it. It's about realizing that you are enough, right now, in this moment. And when you understand this deeply, the need for external approval fades away, and you become free to live your life with peace, joy, and confidence. As you walk this path of detachment, remember that you are not alone. Every step you take in releasing the need for validation brings you closer to the freedom and peace that comes from within. So, take a deep breath, let go, and trust that you are already whole. Mindfulness in social interactions, being present and aware. In life, we are often caught up in the whirlwind of our thoughts, emotions, and daily distractions. It's as if we're always running from one thing to another, without ever truly stopping to breathe, to notice, or to connect. But what if we could approach every moment, especially social interactions, with a sense of complete presence? What if, instead of reacting, we could truly be there, attentive, aware, and calm? Buddhism teaches us that mindfulness, or being fully aware and present in the moment, is one of the most powerful tools for overcoming the feeling of being ignored. When we practice mindfulness, we stop living in the past or future. We become fully immersed in the present, with all our senses awake and alert. And when we bring this awareness into our interactions with others, it changes everything. We stop worrying about whether people will pay attention to us or not. We simply engage with the moment and with the people as they are. To understand mindfulness in social interactions, let's begin with a simple idea. You can't control how others respond to you, but you can control how you respond to the present moment. Most of us go into conversations with expectations. We hope people will listen, agree, or react in a certain way. This leads to disappointment when they don't. But mindfulness teaches us to let go of expectations and just be present. If you walk into a room with no agenda, no need for validation, just an openness to the moment, the way people respond becomes less important. Imagine this. You walk into a group of people. Instead of focusing on whether they'll notice you or how you'll look in their eyes, you focus on how you feel and what's happening in the moment. You pay attention to the sound of their voices, the way they move, the subtle emotions in the room. You may realize that they, too, are simply living in their own heads, worrying about their own things. The moment you stop seeking validation, you start seeing the interaction for what it truly is, an exchange of energy, of thoughts, and of shared experience. Mindfulness in social interactions isn't about being perfect in how you communicate. It's not about saying the right thing or impressing anyone. It's about being real in every moment, no matter how small the interaction. When you practice mindfulness, you stop living in a rush, and you start noticing the details. A simple greeting, the sound of someone's laughter, the warmth of a smile. It all becomes more meaningful when you are truly present. It's no longer about being noticed. It's about genuinely experiencing the moment with others. This presence allows you to listen more deeply. When you stop thinking about what you will say next, when you let go of the pressure to impress, you hear people for who they truly are. You don't just hear their words. You listen to their emotions, their concerns, their intentions. This is the heart of deep communication, the ability to truly understand someone without judgment or distraction. In Buddhism, this is often called right speech, or speaking with awareness, compassion, and honesty. Furthermore, when you stop focusing on how others perceive you, your interactions become more authentic. You stop playing a role, and instead, you become more you. This authenticity naturally draws people in. They sense your genuine presence, and it creates a deeper bond, even if they don't overtly acknowledge you. When you are mindfully present, you are not seeking approval, but offering something much more valuable, your true self. A great practice in mindfulness is to focus on your breath during social interactions. If you start to feel anxious or ignored, simply take a deep breath. Feel the air fill your lungs, and then slowly exhale. This simple act centers your mind and helps you return to the present moment. You will notice that you are no longer trapped in your thoughts about being ignored. Instead, you are fully aware of the interaction unfolding before you. Another way to cultivate mindfulness in social interactions is to practice non-judgmental observation. This means you are not labeling people's actions or words as good or bad, but instead observing them without attachment. For example, if someone cuts you off in a conversation, instead of feeling insulted or frustrated, you simply notice it. You observe their behavior, but you do not allow it to dictate your emotional state. In Buddhism, this practice is known as equanimity, the ability to remain balanced and calm, no matter what external events unfold. This approach does not mean you become detached or aloof. It means you become more attuned to your inner world, so that your reactions are not driven by automatic emotions. Instead of being quick to react to a slight or a perceived insult, you pause, breathe, and then respond thoughtfully. You create space between stimulus and response, allowing you to choose a response that is rooted in awareness rather than impulse. Through mindfulness, you learn to see people and the world around you with fresh eyes. Instead of reacting to them with defensiveness or need, you approach them with curiosity and compassion. You allow people to be who they are, without judgment or expectation, which naturally opens the door to deeper connection. Mindfulness can also transform how we view ourselves in social situations. When we're constantly preoccupied with how others see us, we lose sight of who we truly are. But when we practice mindfulness, we start to realize that our self-worth is not defined by others' opinions. We stop seeking validation in the approval of others and start validating ourselves from within. This shift is one of the most profound aspects of mindfulness. It allows us to stop seeing ourselves through the lens of others' judgments and to embrace ourselves fully. This self-awareness creates a sense of peace that is independent of external circumstances. You don't need others to notice you or acknowledge you to feel validated. You begin to recognize that your presence alone, when you're fully aware and engaged, is enough. And in doing so, you cultivate a natural confidence that doesn't rely on outside praise. As we continue to develop mindfulness in social situations, it becomes a practice that enhances every aspect of our interactions. Whether we're in a crowded room, a one-on-one conversation, or even in moments of silence, we become aware of the energy we're contributing. By simply being present, we give the gift of attention to others, and we start to notice the subtle ways in which we connect. But perhaps the most beautiful aspect of mindfulness is its ability to help us become less reactive and more responsive. In every interaction, we have the choice to respond from a place of mindfulness, not from knee-jerk reactions fueled by insecurity or ego. As we learn to be present, we open ourselves to deeper, more meaningful exchanges that transcend the surface level of social interaction. In the end, mindfulness in social interactions is not about changing the behavior of others. It's about changing how we show up in the world. It's about learning to be present, to listen deeply, to communicate authentically, and to remain rooted in our own peace, regardless of how others may behave. And when we do this, we don't just change our relationships with others, we change our relationship with ourselves. By cultivating mindfulness, we free ourselves from the constant need for validation and approval. We stop chasing attention and start living with intention. And in doing so, we find that we are no longer ignored, but rather, we are fully present and engaged, both with others and with ourselves. This is the power of mindfulness, a tool that can transform not only how we interact with the world, but how we experience life itself. The law of cause and effect, karma and social relationships. In the teachings of Buddhism, one of the most important concepts is the law of cause and effect, often referred to as karma. This principle tells us that every action we take, no matter how small, will eventually lead to a result. What we do today shapes our future, and the effects we feel in life are not random. They are the result of causes we've set in motion. When it comes to relationships, this law plays a huge role. You might feel ignored, or perhaps you feel like your efforts to connect with others are being overlooked. In those moments, It's easy to believe that people's actions toward us are random or even personal. But according to the law of cause and effect, there's always a cause behind everything that happens, including how people treat us. Imagine, for a moment, that you've been working hard to connect with someone, a friend, a colleague, a family member, but they seem distant. They don't respond the way you expect, and it feels like all your efforts are going unnoticed. It's easy to fall into the trap of feeling rejected or disrespected. But Buddhism teaches that the reactions of others toward us are not just about us. They are often reflections of their own experiences, thoughts, and past actions. Karma reminds us that when people act in ways that seem distant or cold, it might not be about us at all. Sometimes, their behavior comes from their own past experiences, emotional baggage, or even their own unresolved struggles. Just as you might have days when you feel down or distant without a clear reason, others are also affected by their own internal world. The key here is to understand that their reactions may not be caused by anything you've done. They are simply expressing their own karma. On the flip side, the law of cause and effect also reminds us that our actions have consequences, too. If we approach people with kindness, compassion, and understanding, we are sowing seeds for positive outcomes in the future. Sometimes, we may not immediately see the fruits of our good actions, but just as a seed takes time to grow into a plant, the effects of our kindness will eventually blossom. Let's take a step further into this idea with a simple example from daily life. Picture a situation where someone ignores you or treats you unfairly. If you respond with anger or resentment, you're adding more negativity to the situation. This negative reaction doesn't just affect the other person. It also affects your own inner peace. In Buddhism, we're taught that these reactions are part of our karma. They create more suffering for ourselves and those around us. But when we respond with understanding or compassion, we change the course of the situation. We might not change the other person's behavior right away, but we begin to shift our own experience and our own inner world. One powerful example of karma in relationships is the idea of forgiveness. It's easy to hold on to grudges, especially when we feel ignored or hurt by others. But when we forgive, we are not just letting go of the past. We are also freeing ourselves from the cycle of negative karma. Holding on to anger and resentment keeps us tied to the same old patterns, repeating the same cycle of hurt and frustration. But when we forgive, we are breaking free from that cycle and opening the door to healing. Forgiveness doesn't mean we condone bad behavior or accept mistreatment. It simply means we let go of the desire for revenge or punishment, allowing us to heal and move forward. It's about understanding that everyone, including ourselves, is carrying their own burdens. And just as we wish to be treated with kindness and understanding, others deserve the same compassion, even if they haven't yet shown it to us. So, when you feel ignored or misunderstood by someone, remember the law of karma. Take a step back and ask yourself, what is the cause of this situation? Is it something I've done? Or is it a reflection of the other person's own struggles or past experiences? By doing this, you can begin to see beyond the surface of their behavior and understand that their actions are part of their own journey. And, more importantly, you can take control of your own actions, responding with compassion and wisdom, rather than reacting with anger or frustration. This approach can transform your relationships, not by changing the other person, but by changing how you respond to them. Remember, the law of karma is always in play, and every action we take has an effect. By choosing to act with kindness, patience, and understanding, we are sowing the seeds for positive relationships in the future. Whether or not people recognize or appreciate your efforts immediately, know that your actions are never in vain. Ultimately, the law of cause and effect teaches us that everything is interconnected. Our actions affect others, and their actions affect us. This interconnectedness means that even if we feel isolated or ignored, the ripples of our kindness and compassion will eventually come back to us in ways we may not immediately see. It's not always easy to practice this, especially when we feel hurt or neglected. But by remembering the bigger picture of karma, we can begin to shift our perspective and break free from the cycle of negativity. In every relationship, there's an opportunity to create positive karma. Whether it's by showing patience with someone who ignores us, being kind to a stranger, or forgiving someone who's wronged us, we are planting seeds for a better tomorrow. It's not always easy, and sometimes it feels like we're not getting the results we want. But trust that every action, no matter how small, has the power to create lasting change. By understanding the law of cause and effect in our social relationships, we can begin to shift the way we view our interactions with others. Instead of focusing on the negative or feeling like victims of others' behavior, we can see each interaction as an opportunity for growth. The more we practice patience, understanding, and compassion, the more we can transform our relationships and create a positive environment around us. So, next time you feel ignored or overlooked, remember the teachings of Buddhism and the law of karma. Take a deep breath, reflect on the causes behind the situation, and choose to respond with kindness. You may not always change the other person's behavior, but you will change your own experience, and that, in itself, is a powerful transformation. Conclusion: embracing change and empowerment through Buddhist teachings. You've now journeyed through this exploration of being ignored, and we've uncovered many truths along the way. But here, at the end of our journey, lies the most crucial question. What happens when we truly embrace these teachings and apply them to our lives? Imagine for a moment. What if being ignored didn't have to define your worth? What if, instead, it could help you discover your true power? The teachings of Buddhism invite us to let go of the illusions we create about ourselves and others. The more we cling to these illusions, the more we remain trapped in cycles of suffering and misunderstanding. But when we let go, when we embrace silence and solitude, when we practice mindfulness, everything changes. Remember that each moment of silence you experience, each moment when you feel overlooked, is an invitation to return to your own center. It's an opportunity to reconnect with your inner self and align with the peace that lies beyond the noise of the world. As we've learned from Buddhist philosophy, peace doesn't come from external validation, from being noticed or praised. It comes from within. And that inner peace is not dependent on anyone's approval. It's yours to claim. So, what does it mean to embrace this change? It means shifting from a place of seeking attention and validation from others to a place of deep understanding that you already possess everything you need within yourself. By accepting yourself fully, flaws and all, you unlock a powerful sense of peace that can't be shaken by the opinions of others. Buddhism teaches us that the path to enlightenment is not about perfection or being admired by the world. It's about knowing who you are, deep within, without needing anyone else to confirm it. It's about realizing that you are enough exactly as you are. When you stop looking outward for approval and start looking inward for peace, that is when true change begins. Through mindfulness and meditation, we cultivate this deeper awareness. We become present in each moment, no longer consumed by the past or worried about the future. This present moment is all we truly have. And when you live fully in the present, you begin to see that the feeling of being ignored becomes less significant. You stop waiting for others to notice you, because you've already noticed yourself. You're aware of your own value, regardless of the external circumstances. Buddhism also reminds us of the impermanence of life. Everything is temporary, including the feeling of being ignored. No situation lasts forever. Just as the seasons change, so too do our experiences. And just like the leaves falling from a tree, the hurt or frustration of being overlooked will eventually fade. But the wisdom you gain from this experience will stay with you forever, shaping you into a wiser and more compassionate person. Another essential teaching is the practice of loving kindness, or metta. When you're ignored, it can be easy to fall into resentment. But Buddhism teaches us that we can choose to respond with love and understanding instead of bitterness. Instead of feeling rejected, we can open our hearts to others, wishing them well, no matter how they treat us. This practice of unconditional love is not about fixing others. It's about healing yourself and seeing the interconnectedness of all beings. As you continue your journey, you'll begin to realize that being ignored isn't something to fear or avoid. It's a gateway to deeper personal growth, a chance to practice detachment and self-awareness. Each time you experience it, you get another opportunity to understand your own mind, to deepen your compassion for others, and to live more fully in the present. And remember, you are not alone on this journey. There are countless others who, too, are navigating the challenges of feeling invisible or overlooked. But through the teachings of Buddhism, we know that these moments of isolation are not to be feared. They are to be embraced as opportunities for inner transformation. You may be wondering, what's the next step after all this wisdom? The next step is to take what you've learned and put it into action. Start by noticing when you feel ignored. Rather than reacting with frustration or self-doubt, take a deep breath. Let go of the need for others' approval. Recognize that you are already complete, just as you are. Practice mindfulness in every interaction. Be fully present with yourself and others, whether in conversation or in silence. Use every moment of solitude to reconnect with your inner peace. And when you do experience the pain of being overlooked, turn inward instead of outward. Ask yourself, what can I learn from this moment? The teachings of Buddhism offer you tools to navigate the complexities of life with grace. They provide you with a roadmap for how to turn feelings of rejection into opportunities for self-discovery and growth. By embracing change, letting go of attachment, and cultivating self-awareness, you'll discover that the very things that once caused you pain can now empower you to live a more peaceful, joyful life. As we come to the end of this video, remember, you are worthy of love and peace, no matter who acknowledges it. Your journey doesn't depend on others' recognition. It depends on your own willingness to seek out the truth within yourself. And that truth is that you are enough. Thank you for staying with us through this journey. If you found value in these teachings, we encourage you to like, comment, and subscribe to Wisdom Woven. Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. We'd love to hear how you plan to apply these insights to your own life. Remember, every comment, every share helps us to continue sharing wisdom with the world. Thank you for being a part of this community. May you find peace and power in every moment, and may the wisdom of Buddhism guide you to greater self-awareness and inner strength.